kennel shook with the impact. Atlas 100 lb of sable-coated fury hit the reinforced gate with enough force to rattle the bolts. His teeth bared, eyes wild, a guttural snarl tearing from his chest. Two handlers stepped back instinctively. One reached for his radio. The other just shook his head. "He's gone," the senior handler muttered. "Whatever came back from that mission, it isn't the dog we sent." Atlas paced the length of his enclosure like a caged predator. His muscles rippled beneath his coat, coiled tight with aggression that had no outlet. Every sound made him snap toward it. Every movement triggered a lunge. The base veterinarian had already signed the preliminary paperwork. The command board had made their decision. This Navy SEAL military working dog, once considered elite among an already exceptional breed, was now labeled a liability. Atlas hadn't always been broken. 2 years earlier, he'd been the kind of dog SEAL teams requested by name. His reputation preceded him into every briefing room, every mission prep, every hot zone insertion. Bred specifically for naval special warfare operations, Atlas had deployed multiple times with SEAL team units operating in some of the most dangerous territories on Earth. His handler, Chief Special Warfare Operator Michael Callahan, known universally as Iron Mike, trusted Atlas with his life. And Atlas had never let him down until the night everything shattered. The mission had been routine by SEAL standards, a nighttime extraction of a high-value asset from a compound deep in hostile territory. Atlas and Iron Mike moved like shadows, silent and precise, the kind of partnership forged through countless hours of training in combat. They'd done this dance dozens of times. But that night, intelligence failed. The ambush came fast. Muzzle flashes erupted from rooftops. RPGs screamed through the night. The extraction point turned into a kill zone in seconds. Iron Mike took the hit, protecting his team, shielding the asset they'd come to retrieve. He went down hard. Atlas stayed. While rounds cracked overhead and explosions sent debris raining down, Atlas positioned himself over his handler's body. He didn't retreat. Didn't follow the extraction order barked by the team leader. He stayed beside Iron Mike, pressed against him, whining softly as the chaos raged around them. When the team finally pulled them both out under cover and fire, Iron Mike was already gone. Atlas survived the firefight without a scratch, but something inside him didn't make it home. The dog that returned stateside was unrecognizable. During his first week back, Atlas destroyed 3 training barriers, sent 2 experienced handlers to medical, and spent 72 consecutive hours refusing food or commands. He wouldn't sleep, wouldn't settle. His eyes carried something the trainers had seen before in combat veterans, a weight that commands couldn't touch. They tried everything. Behavioral specialists, veterinary intervention, different handlers, extended rest periods. Nothing reached him. Atlas had become unpredictable, aggressive, dangerous, even to those trying to help him. The decision came down from command. Atlas was unfit for continued service. Everyone on base understood what that meant. Military working dogs who couldn't be rehabilitated, couldn't be safely rehomed, who posed a danger to handlers. They didn't get retirement ceremonies. One man refused to accept it. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Walker had served alongside Iron Mike on multiple deployments. He'd watched the bond between handler and dog, had seen Atlas perform miracles in the field. When Walker looked at Atlas now, he didn't see a dangerous animal. He saw grief. Walker fought for time. He took personal responsibility for Atlas. Spent hours sitting outside the kennel, without speaking, without trying to touch or command. He took Atlas on long walks in empty fields, letting the dog move without pressure. He tried silent companionship, the kind that asked for nothing. Atlas never softened, never showed a flicker of the trust he'd once given so freely. Command gave Walker 1 final week. After that, the paperwork would be processed. The decision would be final. Walker had 6 days left when he loaded Atlas into his vehicle and drove to a quiet property 30 minutes off base. The house belonged to Sarah Miller, widow of Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniel Miller, one of the most respected operators Walker had ever served with. Daniel had been killed in action 18 months earlier during a classified operation. He hadn't died alone. Ranger Daniel's military working dog had been with him. Sarah met Walker at the gate, her expression understanding without words. She'd known why he was coming. Walker had called ahead, explained the situation, asked for something he knew sounded desperate. "She's out back," Sarah said quietly, leading him through the house. Grace Miller sat in the grass of the backyard. 9 years old, with her father's steady eyes and her mother's quiet strength. She looked up when Walker approached, and she didn't flinch when she saw Atlas straining against the lead, every muscle in his body tight with nervous energy. "Hi, Atlas," Grace said simply. Walker felt his chest tighten. This little girl had already lost so much. Her father had been her hero, a Navy SEAL who deployed more times than Walker could count, who taught his daughter about courage and service and sacrifice. And Ranger had been part of their family since before Grace was born. Daniel Miller and Ranger had been legendary, the kind of handler-dog partnership that became stories told in team rooms. Ranger had been a Belgian Malinois like Atlas, trained for the same high-stakes operations, the same impossible missions. Grace had grown up with that dog. She'd learned to walk holding on to Rurz's collar. She'd fallen asleep with her head on his side. She'd watched her father and Ranger prepare for deployments. Had seen them return exhausted and quiet. Daniel had taught Grace everything about working dogs. How to approach them, how to read their body language, how to respect their nature, how to understand that sometimes warriors, even four-legged ones, carried wounds nobody could see. When Daniel and Ranger were killed during an operation that would remain classified for decades, Grace had understood loss in a way no 9-year-old should. She'd stood beside her mother at the memorial service, had accepted the folded flag, had watched grown SEALs weep openly. She knew what it meant when a warrior came home broken. Walker released Atlas into the open yard, keeping the long lead loose but ready. Atlas exploded with movement immediately, pacing, scanning, growling low in his chest. His eyes tracked everything, searching for threats that existed only in memory. Grace stood slowly. Walker tensed, ready to intervene. "Grace," he started. She raised her hand gently, the same way she'd been taught years ago. Her voice was calm, certain. "You don't have to protect yourself right now," she said to Atlas. The dog froze mid-pace, his ears swiveled toward her voice. "My dad's dog used to feel like this too. After bad missions, Ranger would get scared, not of things outside, but of things he remembered." Atlas stared at her. For the first time since Iron Mike's death, something other than aggression flickered across his expression. Hesitation. Grace sat down in the grass slowly, deliberately. She placed her palm flat on the ground, open and unthreatening. "If you want to come close, that's okay. And if you don't, that's okay too." No commands, no expectations, just understanding offered freely. Walker held his breath. Atlas took one step forward, then another. His body was still tense, still coiled. But the aggression had drained away. He moved toward Grace like he was approaching something fragile, something precious. When he reached her, Atlas lowered his massive head slowly and rested it in her lap. The sound that came from him shattered Walker's composure, a whine, broken, grieving. Desperate from a dog who'd been holding everything inside since the night his world ended. Atlas pressed against Grace, and his whole body trembled. Grace's small hand moved gently to his ears, stroking softly. "You were brave," she whispered. "So was my dad, so was Ranger. You did everything right." Tears burned Walker's eyes as he watched a combat-hardened war dog finally grieve. Grace didn't try to train Atlas. She remembered him. She came to visit him every day that week. She sat with him in the grass and read stories aloud, the same ones her father used to read to her. She talked to him about Ranger, about the things her dad had taught her, about how warriors sometimes needed permission to stop fighting. Through Grace, Atlas began to trust Walker again, not because of commands or discipline, but because the little girl who understood loss vouched for him. Training resumed. This time Atlas didn't just comply, he excelled. His obedience was flawless. His tracking precision was razor sharp. His controlled engagement drills were textbook perfect. The dog, who'd been written off as broken, proved he was still elite. Atlas wasn't just operational again, he was exceptional. 3 weeks later, Walker brought Atlas to visit Grace at her home. It was a Saturday afternoon, quiet and warm. Grace was reading on the porch while Sarah worked in the garden. Walker and Atlas walked the property perimeter, old habits from men who'd spent careers staying alert. The scream cut through the peace like a blade. Walker's head snapped up. A man had Grace by the arm, dragging her toward a parked vehicle at the property's edge. Sarah was running from the garden, shouting. Walker didn't think. He reacted. "Atlas!" The command cracked like thunder. Atlas launched forward with the speed and precision of the elite operator he'd always been. He covered 50 yards in seconds, his focus laser locked on the threat, The man saw him coming and released Grace, stumbling backward too late. Atlas hit him with controlled force enough to take him down hard, but not to kill. The dog's jaws clamped onto the man's arm, holding position exactly as trained. The man screamed and thrashed. Atlas didn't budge. His body covered the threat, immobilizing him completely, waiting for his handler's next command. But Atlas's eyes, his eyes never left Grace. Walker was there in seconds, weapon drawn, Sarah pulling Grace to safety. Local authorities arrived within minutes. The attacker was arrested, taken away in cuffs and terror. Through it all, Atlas maintained position, controlled, disciplined, lethal if necessary, but perfectly restrained. When Walker finally called him off, Atlas went straight to Grace. He pressed against her legs, whining softly, checking her over with the same protective intensity that had once guarded Iron Mike. Grace wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good boy." Atlas was officially reinstated as a United States Navy military working dog. The following week, he was assigned to Lieutenant Commander Walker as his permanent partner. Within Naval Special Warfare Command, Atlas became more than just an operational asset. He became a symbol not of aggression or violence, but of something SEALs rarely talked about openly. The cost of service, the bonds that survived death, the warriors left behind who still had purpose. Grace continued visiting Atlas regularly. Every time she came to base, he greeted her the same way, with a soft whine and his head lowered gently beneath her hand, the same way he had that first day in her backyard. Veterans who heard Atlas's story understood it in ways civilians couldn't. They'd seen brothers come home broken. They'd watched warriors struggle with wounds nobody could see. They knew what it meant when someone reached through the darkness and offered connection instead of judgment. Parents told the story to their children quietly, teaching them that heroes weren't always the ones who never fell. Sometimes heroes were the ones who found reasons to stand back up. SEAL teams told the story to new operators, reminding them that the bonds forged in combat meant something beyond the battlefield. That loyalty wasn't conditional, that brothers took care of brothers, even when, especially when it was hard. Sarah Miller kept a photograph on her mantle. It showed Grace sitting in the grass with Atlas beside her, his head resting peacefully in her lap. Beside it stood another photo, Daniel in his uniform, Ranger at his side, both of them ready for whatever mission came next. The legacy continued because Grace had learned from her father that courage wasn't the absence of fear or pain. Courage was showing up anyway. It was offering trust when trust had been shattered. It was believing that broken things could be made whole again. Daniel Miller had taught his daughter that warriors came in many forms. Some wore uniforms and carried rifles. Some walked on 4 legs and tracked enemies through the darkness. All of them deserved honor. All of them deserved to be remembered. When Daniel and Ranger fell together in service to their country, Grace could have let that loss consume her. Instead, she carried forward everything they taught her. She became living proof that sacrifice wasn't the end of the story. It was the foundation for what came next. Atlas, the Navy SEAL dog everyone had given up on, wasn't saved by force or discipline or training protocols. He was saved by a 9-year-old Gold Star daughter who understood that warriors don't need to be fixed. They need to be seen. They need to know their service mattered. They need to remember they're not fighting alone. And in the quiet moments, when Atlas rested his head beneath Grace's hand, both of them carried the same truth. The ones we love never truly leave us. They live on in the courage we show, in the loyalty we give, in the moments we choose connection over fear. Some bonds are forged in fire and sealed in sacrifice. Those bonds don't break when the mission ends. They transcend loss. They outlive war. They become legacy. If this story moved you, if Atlas and Grace's courage reminded you why we honor those who serve, then subscribe, because these stories matter, these warriors matter, and their sacrifice will never be forgotten. Remember, true courage isn't never falling down. It's finding the strength to rise again, and helping others do the same. That's what heroes do. That's what Atlas and Grace proved. That's the legacy every warrior leaves behind.